You're listening to Drinks and a Movie with your host, Rudy. Spoiler alert.
We go Drinks and Movie Podcast. Everyone, thanks for checking out this video. I've got Becky Smith with me once again. This time we're going to be talking about Nelson Bros whiskey. So thanks for joining me. And what do we got this time?
Thanks. I know. I'm just going to start sponsoring your podcast, I guess. Thanks for having me again. I know we've tasted on High West, and we are going to be tasting on Casa Noble. Today is Nelson's Brier Distillery out of Nashville, Tennessee. I am from South Carolina, so if you hear a real Southern twang start to come out as I talk about this brand, just roll with it, Rudy. But I have to say, you know, I love all my brands. They're like my babies and different children, and they all have their unique personalities, but there's something about Nelson's Brier that just hits so home. I don't know if it is the Southern ties. I don't know if it's like I'm a huge history buff, and hearing this story, it's literally like the American dream and just bottled Americana, you know, history. So we'll talk about that some as we go through. I would say just as like, you know, things to look out for is we're going to talk a lot about the history and the story, and it's a long one, but it's a good one. I'm ready for it to be a movie. But then we'll talk about kind of, you know, the history and the homage there, but also what we're doing now, and where we're going as a distillery. We are quintessential craft. So we're fairly small production on the grand scale of things. We're still fairly young compared to a lot of distilleries. And then being in Tennessee, you know, makes us, you know, that's an even smaller subsect. So I'm going to, you know, try and make this as streamlined because the story does date back to the 1800s. And that's kind of where we're going to start is Germany, mid-1800s, with what we know today as Charlie and Andy Nelson. So in this case, it would have been their, not even triple great, their quadruple great grandfather, John, who was a soap and candle maker. He had kind of set out in the mid-1800s that he wanted to come to America. He wanted to bring his family out here, and, you know, like so many, chasing that American dream, searching for a better life overseas. So that's kind of where we start is, you know, deep in the throes of history. John essentially sells off his business. He sells off all the family possessions, and he turns them into like gold bars, to which, for the passage overseas, he thinks that's the safest and the smartest way to get all their possessions and the family treasure essentially over to America. They actually take those gold bars and they sew them on the inside of his suit that he's going to wear. Unfortunately, the ship that they were on, basically there was a wreck, so they go to the second ship that rescues them, and unfortunately John does fall overboard. So everything, himself, but all of the gold and the family possessions that were in his clothing on his person are at the bottom of the Atlantic. So here you are, a mother and her children, you know, with nothing. They're arriving in America, in New York, in the mid-1800s with literally just the clothes on their back. Charles Nelson, Charlie and Andy's triple great-grandfather, was the oldest at 15 years old, and he basically was now head of the family. You think about it, back then, females didn't have a lot of authority, not a lot of power. They definitely couldn't work and make money. So it all fell to young Charles to basically take care of his family, his younger brothers and sisters, and really, you know, make sure that they weren't completely destitute in America starting off. So he does the only thing he knows how, he learned from his father, he starts making soap and candles. So a few years later, as he's growing in the trade and the craft, he sees opportunity in Ohio. So he moves the family out to Ohio, where he gets more into the craft and the trade. He actually you know, starts getting into the grocery business. He starts seeing like, okay, and you think about it, if you're selling, you know, your work, you're selling your product, he's getting it into stores. This brings him down to Nashville, Tennessee in, you know, basically the 1860s, where already there was a distillery called Brier Distillery in Brier, Tennessee, about 30 miles north of the city of Nashville. And he just really, like, everybody just loved him. He really knew his trade. He knew his craft. And he starts in his grocery store selling what I think is the holy trinity of whiskey, meat, and coffee. A well-balanced diet. So he, you think about it, he's starting to work with butchers. And he's selling their meat. He's working with Brier Distillery. He's selling the whiskey, and then he's selling coffee. One fun fact is that coffee was apparently so good that a hotel down the street brought it in, and they made it their coffee. The name of it was called Maxwell. So rumor has it, is it Maxwell's coffee? I don't know. But actually the grocery store too, the chain that he started, is still in operation. It's very regional now. So I think a few left in Nashville, but if you're local to there, you say the name of it, most people are like, oh, I actually know that grocery store chain. So, this is really rich history. And that's what I'm looking at right now is bottled history. So dating back to 1860, we're looking at the original Tennessee whiskey. Nelson's Greenbrier, he actually had the opportunity in 1870 to take over and buy the distillery. So he was already selling this. Now he completely takes over. He's expanding the distillery, expanding operations, and he has full control over the mash bill, the sourcing, bottling, blending, bottling, everything. And so that's how we have Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery. At one point in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we have records showing that this was the top produced whiskey in America. We have records of, I think it's over 2 million bottles being sold, found in Russia, in the Philippines. Like, this is kind of crazy when you think late 1800s, and what a different time versus, now it's, of course you can find stuff overseas and imports, but back then, much, much harder journey. So it just shows you what kind of name Charles Nelson made for himself. Unfortunately, we get to 1891 and Charles falls sick and passes away suddenly. His wife, Louisa, I have to say, one of the premier badass females, not just in the industry, but in general. Again, women couldn't even vote. They couldn't even go to a bar unescorted without their husband or a male companion. She certainly couldn't work, but she took over running the distillery. So you have Louisa Nelson at the helm of Nelson's Greenbrier. It seems, based on some records and things that we find about the distillery, I think she might have already kind of been involved in working with Charles. Seems like she had some busy business savviness to her, because they didn't miss a beat at the operations. So there's records showing she just kept cranking. She actually had some really cool things to keep growing the brand, keep marketing. And actually in 1906, we got this label that you see on the bottle was actually the original. She copyrighted it with the American government, knew, hey, this is our legacy. Again, it just shows you like she had the business acumen. We've made a few modern modifications for it to adjust for Charlie and Andy's name. And of course, ABV content. You didn't need that back in the back in the day. But it's really, really cool to know that like there, again, not only is the juice inside, bottled history, but the label itself, the story is just so wrapped up in history and tradition. So the next thing that kind of we hit in the, a snag in the story, if you will, is Prohibition. So the thing about Prohibition is for everybody else, it didn't hit until 1922, I think. In Tennessee, it was actually started there because of the women's suffrage movement. We're thinking, and based on writings and different things that you pull up from the history books, that Louisa, either she or the people in the circles she ran in were probably in on those meetings. She knew Prohibition was right around the corner, and this law was going to take effect in Tennessee first before rolling out to other states. Basically, women didn't want their men coming home drunk anymore, and they were going to put a stop to it. And essentially, that's kind of how Prohibition started. So what did she do? She knew it was coming down the pipeline, knew Tennessee was going to shut down before others, so she actually had the whole distillery take everything we've already produced, barreled, and let's ship it out to another state. So let's send it to a neighboring state where Prohibition laws weren't going to go into effect yet. So she kept the distillery running for a few years longer than it would have just producing in Tennessee. So she continued to make the business money until, unfortunately, Prohibition was a national, decree, and everything shuttered. All the operations, no more selling, distributing, nothing. At that point, everyone's like, oh, I guess you could have done it underground, or like, how did we not keep this alive? You think of such a prominent family as the Nelsons had become in Nashville and Tennessee, especially with Louisa at the helm. And I'm sure their children, it's like they went on, they went to school, they became, I'm sure, doctors, bankers, all these prestigious roles, in communities, what's considered, respected professions, and basically was like, we can't be associated with something that's, that's illegal,
Right.
and had a very negative connotation with, being involved in alcohol. So really, that's where the story, that part of the story really ended. It kind of died with Prohibition. So you bring us now to 2023, and it's like, how is this the original Tennessee whiskey? A lot of people are like, I've never heard of it. That really brings us to today, and I've mentioned Charlie and Andy Nelson's name a couple times now. They are the modern iteration of this. They are restoring their family's legacy, and their part of the story is really fun to tell. So as much history as we've already had with John and with Charles, Louisa, now you fast forward to 2006, Charlie and Andy were actually, funny enough, they're from Nashville, but they went to Loyola Marymount College here in Southern California, and I think Andy is older, he'd already graduated, but I think Charlie was still in college. But it was a summer day, they were back home in Nashville, and basically their dad went in on basically, I think, a full cow. So he said, come on, boys, we're all going to get it. So it was out in Greenbrier, Tennessee. So they load up, they go out there. There's a gas station. So Greenbrier is very, very small. There's not much going on in there, but there was a gas station that they needed to stop at. And in that parking lot, on the far corner on the main road, is one of those, green National Historical landmarkers. I believe it was Charlie who walked over there stretching his leg, and him and Andy are tall guys, so they were just kind of like, okay, cool. And lo and behold, Charlie sees a sign that says Historic Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery, and he's reading it, and it says Charles Nelson. His name is Charles Nelson. Now, the way they tell it, and I always giggle at it, because they're like, we just thought family stories that our, triple grade or whoever was just like a bunch of, moonshiners. Mm. They didn't know at this point quite, the depth and the breadth of their family history and the whiskey production that, their triple great-grandfather was responsible for. So, of course, I think, like most people, you're a bit curious. You see the name there, and you're like, what the heck is this? And I want to find out more. So they ask, I think, the gas station attendant. He's like, I don't know a whole lot, but they go to their butcher. The butcher's like, well, I bet the town historian. He's like, there's, the old distilleries down the road on Distiller Road. And he's like, yeah. He's like, go down. There's actually some parts of it, I think, still up. So they drive down the road, and sure as the world, and it's still there today, is parts of the old rick house. That structure is still there. You can actually pull in, peek in. Definitely not safe. So if you find yourself in Greenbrier, Tennessee, please be safe if you're peeking in. But the old spring that goes to the spring house, that water is still there. It's still moving and very fresh. They drink from the water. They walk the grounds, and it's just almost like a chill. Mm-hmm. That's the way they describe it. It's just like, whoa, like this is real. This is cool. Fun fact, in Tennessee, every county has to have a historian. We love our history in the South, and we want to make sure it's well documented. And so they actually met with a local historian who I think was just tickled pink that somebody was coming in, oh my gosh, what do you want to know? Lo and behold, had a couple of bottles of the original Tennessee whiskey, had newspaper clippings, and basically this little feature of Nelson's Greenbrier. Big deal for this, small little town. So I think for Andy and Charlie, they just got the wheels turning as they researched more, and they just launched into their family history. And I have to say, it was all so well documented. We would not be here as a brand, as a distiller, without the cool documentation, not just from Charles and Louisa, but from their team, the people that they were working with back then. Their whole motto was, we're doing whiskey to be enjoyed, to be shared. We're not creating something that needs to sit on a shelf. Like, we want everyday drinking whiskey, and that's kind of, we want everybody to know about it, right? So we not only found the history of the distillery and all these articles and trademarks and things of that nature, but we also found the mash bill and the process on how to create Nelson's Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey. So what we are drinking today again, I go back to, it is bottled history. As Charlie likes to say, it's his $1.50 whiskey because he paid $1.50 in quarters to print off the recipe on microfiche. So you can imagine going through there and being like, aha, like I found it. I go back to, similar with High West and a lot of craft distilleries, though, is I want to open a distillery. I want to make something, but you need time, you need money, and things of that nature. How do we do that? And that's where Belle Meade comes into play. So a lot of people, recognize Belle Meade. That brand's been around for quite a few years and has an amazing following. Essentially, Andy and Charlie kind of put on their entrepreneurial hats as they were figuring out how do we get here to the Tennessee whiskey? How do we produce that? They started contract sourcing for the Belle Meade bourbon. So they started sourcing that and blending, really learning as they were going how to become distillers, working in the community and the trade. Nashville's not that far off from the Bourbon Trail. So working with, really well-known distillers and people in the craft industry, this is what we want to do, and this is what we're working on right here. How can you help us? They were not bashful of asking for help, banging on doors, and got told a lot of no's, but thankfully there were some people along the way that said yes, and that's how Belle Meade came into basically fruition. It was a means to launch Nelson Brothers, or launch Nelson's Greenbrier. The new iteration now you see is Nelson Brothers, and that really brings the story full force. Is Belle Meade is not going away per se. We will still be doing a distillery-only release once a year under the Belle Meade label. But when you see all of this lined up, and now that we have the Nelson's Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey in full, circulation and across the nation, it's almost just that idea. You want to see everything aligned. Is you want to know that's the Nelson Brothers, or like that's Nelson's Greenbrier, and that's essentially why we flipped over. So Belle Meade, maybe you're not finding it all the time, but you are finding its modern iteration, which is the Nelson Brothers Classic and the Reserve Bourbon. And then I brought with us today. A lot of people knew Belle Meade for their unique finishes. So a honey cask, black bell, cognac, Madeira, sherry. So we're continuing to do those finish. That's really showcasing Andy and Charlie as distillers, their production team showing them as not just really smart, businessmen that revived this incredibly historic distillery, but also their own right in the industry and putting their own name on it as far as blending and as far as, doing these cool finishes and what can we play with. So I think that's one thing, we find in craft is this is a lot of passion, a lot of, geeking out on it. And so that's really where I say the Tennessee whiskey is all about the history and bringing back, reviving the original Tennessee whiskey. We're moving forward to these new iterations and having bourbons, high rye bourbons, finished, in unique ways, or, set to hopefully launch maybe this year or next. Details to be announced soon, but we're releasing our first rye under the Nelson Brothers label. So it's super exciting for us to build the portfolio in Nashville. Currently, we're actually expanding the distillery. So the next time you go out there, definitely have to pop in and check it. It's in the heart of Nashville, but we're going through a massive expansion, and it's just going to be. It's already a really cool experience, but I'm excited to see the growth and continue as our fandom grows. So I already poured us a few because we have a little bit to get through and talk about just, in the spirit wise, but any questions on the story? I know that was like a full history lesson there. I like to call that the campfire. That's like, how much time do you have? Because it is a really cool story with a lot of little details, but one that just doesn't get old. Yeah,
no questions. Yeah, I mean, I think stuff might get inspired as we work through it, but...
Awesome. Well, the first one then that we're going to sip on is our Tennessee whiskey. And I say it's the original, obviously, because this recipe dates back to the 1860s. And, this is truly the original mash bill and the process. The only thing that we didn't know exactly is, what acreage or like what area did this grain come from. But it is a wheated whiskey, so we don't have any rye in it. So you're going to notice not only in the color where it's a bit lighter, but probably on the nose. Definitely when you're drinking it, it's a much lighter spirit. You're not going to... I don't want to say you're missing out on spice, because trust me, this one does still have nice punchy spicy notes, but not so much of like that richness that rye can sometimes carry with the weight and the texture.
Yeah.
But this one's just going to be a lot lighter, bit smoother, but it's not a slouch. It's 91 proof, and we did that as a nod to Charles Nelson, because he passed away in 1891. So other fun fact about this too is we talked about the label, but also this is a 3D mold cast off the original bottle.
I love that label,
So
by the way.
isn't it really cool? And it says handmade sour mash. A lot of people that maybe throws them off. Sour mash is pretty commonly used in the industry now. It's really for continuity between. So it's just a style of taking a back set in the process, and you're basically taking what was already, fermented and distilled and putting it back into a fresh batch. So some people are like, sour, I don't know if I want that. I'm here to tell you, I just think in the maybe late 1800s, early 1900s, that wasn't a common practice. I haven't done my research on that leg of it, but now it's pretty common amongst whiskey producers. So, all right. I can't wait to hear what you think.
I mean, the nose is really, really good. I need to go in for another sip. I will say right off the bat, like, I'm typically not a wheater fan, but I do like this one.
And you're actually getting in this about 16-17% wheat. So your corn and your malted barley, but you can really tell with the wheat grain that automatically it just takes on a different personality than your typical bourbons. And of course with Tennessee whiskey, I like to call it a bourbon plus, because a lot of them they're made like a bourbon, but the extra additional, it has to go through the Lincoln County process.
Right.
So for anybody listening that's not unsure what makes a Tennessee whiskey, you have to be made in Tennessee, and then you actually have to go through that sugar maple charcoal process. For us at Nelson's Greenbrier, it's actually a really tedious process. We don't have some elaborate, charcoal mellowing. It's a barrel. And we take a funnel and we run it through with the sugar maple charcoal. So every ounce of this juice runs through that single barrel. So it's when you think about that and you're like, holy cow, I'm like, we are still that's the way they did it back in the day. And we're continuing that practice.
So there's like someone with the bucket just...
it's literally like it's a board over the top of the barrel with a big metal funnel, and we're just pouring the juice right through.
Yeah, and that's the new make, right? So that's before it gets barreled. It's getting filtered, so it's distilled.
Right.
Then you charcoal filter it. Then you go into the barrel.
And then this is aged. It's a blend of 2 to 5 years on it. And if you think about it, you would think 2 years. That's fairly young, of course. And even in industry, most of this is older. About 4 to 5 years is more of what's used. But what I also like to point out is charcoal actually, the way it interacts with the spirit and it goes into the barrel, it actually kind of jump starts the aging process. So on average, you're actually looking about an extra 1.5 years in taste, versus, while it's 2 years, actually kind of drinking at like 3.5, comparatively speaking, just because it goes through that charcoal process, that mellowing process. So that's always like interesting to keep in mind too, is the year might be 2 to 5, on that spectrum, but you're really drinking slightly older.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I'm no expert on this, but it definitely doesn't taste like a really young, like a young blend at all. That was really good. Like very caramelly, and light, light, and I definitely get like the wheat rather than the rye. Like I can taste that difference for sure, but it's not like too soft like some wheaters can be.
Yeah.
And there's still I like a lot of heat, like high proof, and for 91, it's like, and I don't want to scare people off with this. It's not like it doesn't drink smooth, it does, but there's a good, like you said, there's still like a little bit of like a spice and
Yeah.
like a heat to it. That's
I like
that's
to
really
call it
great whiskey.
Thank you. Well, I say thank you like I made it. I'm taking all the credit, Charlie and Andy. No, that's one of the biggest things is with wheat, it can sometimes fall really flat, you know, and just it seems to lack some of those other components and those flavor notes that we look for in bourbon, predominantly coming from that rye, of course. But that's where I think this one really stands out. Doing that high proof, no chill filtration, it has enough heat that you can. I like to say this is your workhorse. This is the one that I can drink straight. You can shoot it back. You can also put it in a cocktail. You know, it's beautiful in a lot of your classics, just because it's always fun to see what pulls out, you know, as you're mixing. But I've found that this is one of the most versatile whiskeys, and the price point. It is your call. Like, it is your go-to. You want a really, really good bottle of whiskey, and you don't want to break the bank. That's where the Nelson's Greenbrier is at for you. Yeah. And then one thing to note, Rudy, is if you turn over and look at the bottom, so you look at the back, but look at the bottom, it says DSP5TN. So that's actually showing that we found records of being the 5th registered distillery in the state of Tennessee. And we used to be called Old Number 5. So a little fun, but that's actually a sketch of the original Greenbrier Distillery. I think that's they said was taken off of a photo about like the early 1900s, like maybe around 1901 or so. And you got a little bit of the story back there. But I just, so much history in this single bottle. And like I said, the label being original, except for we added Charlie and Andy's name to it. And then, of course, it has your alcohol content.
Yeah. I really like this one. That's really good. I love the look too. It's like,
right?
I just love that it's an OG label. It looks like it should be in a movie, like in a Western. I love that. It's going to look great on my shelf soon.
Right, exactly. And the cool thing is, this is now found nationwide. It is your everyday drinker, so it's exactly meant to be. It's an approachable price point, and it's great to put on your home bar, to do as your daily mixer or a sipper, or if you want to give it as a gift. It's still got so much history and uniqueness, but it's coming in at such a great price point, whereas we're seeing a lot of whiskeys are ticking up, that they are really trying to keep true to how Charles Nelson wanted it, that this was for everybody. This was whiskey to be shared, to be enjoyed, and I know I enjoy it regularly. And our slogan for this, and that's why I brought you that fun hat, is "Get you some Greenbrier." So we just want to paint the nation green, but here in Southern California, definitely it's been really fun to share this story, to meet people who were such a fan of Belle Meade and introduce them to Nelson's, to explain why we did what we did, and a lot of roads were to get to the Tennessee whiskey, to bring this back into production. We did the first bottling in 2019 for the masses, and that was the first one since 1909. So 110 years later, we brought this back and resurrected the family recipe, but the family history. I think that's the other thing for me is, you think about, they had no idea what their family legacy was. They were two guys, recently graduated, but about to graduate college, that had no idea, frankly, what they were going to do. And this is their words, not mine. But they were like, we were humanities and philosophy majors. Like, we didn't know what our lives, what we had in store for us. And it really was that moment, going to get a cow from a butcher. I mean, you don't get more southern small town than that. Yeah. And you discover, that you discover your family history and how, that legacy and how you get to play a role in it. So I think for them, like, hearing them talk about it, it gets them very, very excited. And so for me, it's just, I already told you how much I geek out over spirits in this industry and over craft spirits particularly. But to hear this story, to work with them and, help build this brand and introduce people to it. Not only is it great juice, as we move through the line, you're going to see they all kind of have their own personalities for sure. But to be a part of history is pretty damn cool, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So we spoke a lot about the Tennessee whiskey, the history there, the OG history, and then, it's more recent history. This is never going to change, right? Like this is, he is who he is. He's the OG Tennessee whiskey. But there's also got to be, as I think Charlie and Andy said, they're like, what would Charles Nelson do? And he wouldn't be like, yeah, just take what I did and just keep it moving. Do something of your own, make it your own. And I think that's where Nelson Brothers is, that's its purpose. As they have become, especially Andy, head of production and distilling, as he has flexed his creative muscles and he's learned and grown as a distiller, as a blender, and then getting into the finish, the unique finishes, that's where we're seeing. We have our classic bourbon and then we have our reserve bourbon. Those are kind of like your baseline, starting platform before we get into the unique finishes and different marks from there. Both are a high rye bourbon, so you're looking at about 25 to 30% rye in these. So you're going to know that.
Good.
Right? Is it right? It barely. You're not even going to get this Glencairn even close to your nose, and you're going to pick up on those notes, which is so beautiful. Personally, I think it gives this bourbon a lot of texture to it. A lot of the beautiful spice notes we've already gushed over about rye. But the minimum on both of these is 4-year age. The classic is about an average of 5, whereas the reserve is a bit older. The average there is 7, but you're seeing a blend as old as like 11, sometimes 13 years. So definitely on more, on the older side. And fun fact about the reserve bourbon is in December, Whiskey Advocate named this the number 10 on their Whiskeys of the World for 2022 list. So really excited, since both of these came out last April, so April 2022, these were launched. And we're just seeing really great success, people really resonating. So I would start with the classic. Again, these are both high proof bourbons. So we're starting at a 93.3 proof on the classic. And then we jump up just, like 10 points or so on the reserve. And that one's coming in at 107.8. I will say, though, I won't give away too much before you get to them, but the reserve, even though it's, it's almost 108, it does not drink like it. So I'm really excited as we move from the Tennessee whiskey over to the Nelson Brothers to hear what you think as we move down the line. I obviously get way too jazzed about this.
Yeah, definitely a big difference from the we did for sure.
And I would say we didn't even talk about it on the We Did, but one thing I just keep always coming back to is like apple pie. You've got those like tart, green apples, cinnamon flavored, but like still really soft. As we move over here, it's almost like a little bit darker fruit notes. Definitely a lot of spice. But yeah, what are you? Are you on the reserve or?
I'm still on the classic.
Okay.
Man, it's got definitely has a lot of spice. Again, I love it's very bold. It's got a lot of depth. I can't pick out that many flavors right now. It has that same caramelly, creamy sweetness as this one, but then more of the spice. So sweet with a good amount of heat. Man, that's really good.
Yeah.
So now here's a reserve.
And especially for a younger bourbon, that classic is definitely great to enjoy neat, but it's also going to be really, really fun in a cocktail. And I think that's where it's supposed to lie, right? Is you have that versatility. It's at a price point, again, where it's not going to break the bank for an everyday sipper. And then you move over to the reserve. Not to say I would not make a cocktail with a reserve. It is beautiful, but this one is really meant to be a sipper. It is got an elegant, super, super beautiful finish. I'm mildly obsessed with.
Definitely darker, like you said, darker notes. Yeah, these are both excellent. Dang. And then with this being, the classic being a high rye as well. I can imagine that being really great in an old fashioned where it's going to really cut through,
Yeah, I would say the classic, versus the Tennessee whiskey, which is, it's super great. And if you're introducing somebody to a whiskey, I think it's a really nice one to start with, whether straight or in a cocktail.
Yeah.
Because it has a little bit lighter features, you could probably use some modifiers and things to kind of blend it a little bit more, so it's not like full whiskey, but or the full whiskey, flavor profile. But as you move over to Nelson Brothers, that bourbon with the high rye content, to me, it shines through in a cocktail. So you want to, do your classics that are very spirit forward, but if you find a riff on it, a lot of Italian modifiers, like Amaros and aperitifs, things of that nature that have a really herby, again, I talk about it in terms of like weight and texture. Like they might be heavier, and they can easily overpower other ingredients,
right?
And really outperform your base spirit. You don't have that problem with Nelson Brothers. I would say the classic, even the Reserve, I've done some cocktails with it, but it punches through. And so you're still, it shines so beautifully. And you're going to get a spirit forward, definitely a boozy cocktail, but something that is so enjoyable with the other flavors that you pull out.
Yeah, this is really good bourbon. There's like, I'm not being bullshit right now, but there's something like without deciphering specific flavors, there is, and this is the thing I love about like whiskey and why I want to do this on the podcast along with movies. It's all about like feelings and taking you back to a time, and like drinking these two right now kind of remind me of like when I first started getting into this and like tasting the stuff I love for the first time and like wanting to engage in it and learn more and yeah, no, it's like it's bringing me back to like a moment like in my life.
I love that.
Like in all honesty, it's like.
But that's what it's about.
Man,
like that is something that is so organic that you connect with, that only you can feel. And maybe it's sometimes hard to like find the words to talk about. And that's where I go back to. It doesn't matter if you taste butterscotch and popcorn. Yeah. If you like it, that's what matters, and you connect with it. And it's the same for me. Like, I drink these, and growing up in the South, I joke that, you started drinking whiskey at a young age. They put it on the back of your gums when you're teething, so it's almost like in your DNA. But truly, there is something so unique and beautiful about each of these spirits, about walking through the distillery, seeing pieces of history. You take all that together, and for me, it definitely takes me back, and I very much connect with it.
Yeah.
So it's I get a little too eager maybe, but I'm like, ooh, tell me what you think. But it's so nice to hear you have that same connection with it.
Yeah.
In your own way.
Yeah. No, these are exceptional. I'm pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure what to expect. Like I had said, I had one like Bellmead product a while ago, but I haven't tried any of this like current lineup, and I didn't even know they were going to be a high rye, which is definitely up my alley, as you know. But man, like as far as like high rye bourbons go, like shit, this is
there's not a lot of them either.
Top of
I
what
I think that's the other thing is like we set out to do a high rye bourbon because when you look on the market, people who say, "Oh, it's high rye," you're lucky if it's 15%.
Right. Right.
And so rye is so powerful that you can kind of get away with it and be like, "Oh, of course I pick up on it." But a lot of the bourbons out there, most of your Tennessee whiskeys actually have rye in them as well. So for us, it's really maximizing that. Not quite a straight rye, of course.
Yeah.
We'll get into that, and we're flexing those muscles too. But to create a true high rye bourbon, like I said, the average is 25-30%. So that's a very high content, but it's so balanced and smooth by the aging process, the blending process, that I'm tickled pink with it, like I said.
I feel like really good right now. Like I just feel like, man, it makes me like, it literally makes me think like whenever I feel like, man, I'm over here setting up these lights by myself and it's a struggle and it's not like, and I got to edit all this stuff and like, it's still fun, but it's a lot of work on top of everything else I have to do. But man, it's like trying this like makes me think of like what, like it reminds me why I'm doing this and why I want to, like, I'm lucky to have you on here so that we can share this with other. I'm glad you shared it with me, and now I get to share it with other people. And that's like
exactly
really great.
What it's about. Is glass to lip education. Truly getting to enjoy it though with people who appreciate it. And your first time, and you, like you said, you weren't sure what to expect. So, and that's how I feel a lot of times. Like people tell you, oh, I hear this or I see that, and you just never know until you have a sip. And I just keep coming back to Nelson's. I love the story. Who doesn't love a great story?
Yep.
But apart from that, even if it was just two brothers, they decided let's be distillers, they're doing a damn good job.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing is they are two of the just like easygoing, like low-key, salt of the earth kind of guys that they want to make this accessible. So while the Reserve is a little bit more premium, it's still, again, it's not a bank buster. These are still wonderful, approachable spirits that these three you can find right now nationwide. We're continuing to grow out here in Southern California, and really for a lot of people make the connection between Belle Meade and Nelson's Greenbrier and letting them know it's from the same house. This is the story. This is why we moved over to Nelson Brothers. But as Andy likes to say, it's like we're working with a full spice rack now. So before there were maybe some limitations under the Belle Meade label. Now, as Nelson Brothers tweaked a few things, but I've tasted these side by side, and you're going to see that they are different, the Belle Meade and the Nelson Brothers, but very, very subtly.
Yeah.
You really wouldn't know unless you're doing that side by side comparison, or you just got a crazy good palate and memory. But these are very, very similar. Changing the proof a little bit, obviously changed the packaging, but we're moving through. And everybody, with Belle Meade, I think kind of like with High West, right? People started knowing us for limited releases and unique finishes and really getting geeky with it. And that brings us to one of my favorite finishes, which is the honey cask. So this was a distillery only, the first time we've done it under the Nelson Brothers label. So we used to do it. It's probably one of the best sellers for Belle Meade. But now we did it with Nelson Brothers, and I think we might be releasing some more. Hopefully, at least my fingers are crossed, it'll be outside the distillery on the next run, but I'll be patient. But I just wanted to bring this as just to showcase, what we're doing, and let people know at home that while Belle Meade, that label is going to be just a distillery only release, all the things that you expected under Belle Meade, the cool releases. So we currently have it's regional only, but a sherry cask finish. We did the honey cask. I can't speak for them and I don't know plans per se, but I know that we'll be continuing to do these fun cask finishes. So for those that really enjoyed Black Belle, which was like a stout finish, a Madeira, cognac, things of that nature, you can expect to see these unique finishes as we progress and we grow. Not only grow our facilities, but also grow the brand. So we don't want to come out the gate too hard with, here's all the things we have. But for those that are collectors or big fans of the brand or passing through Nashville and you stop in and it's available to you, I highly encourage. That's a fun place to be. So if you're already in Nashville, it's not too far. It's on Clinton Road, I think, and it's a really cool facility. It's almost like a little museum, and you have a tiny general store. And again, all this is about to get changed, so they're going to expand the store, but you can see where we bottle and where we blend and things of that nature. I think they're going to be doing a more comprehensive distillery tour now, so you can go through the facility. But there are true historical artifacts all throughout the distillery. So we're not just making, we're not just blowing smoke. This is true. We have records and newspaper clippings and old photos of all the pieces of our history. So it's just an exciting time for us at Nelson's. And like I said, I'm really proud to be a part of Constellation Brands, but particularly this one is a fun one to represent. So on that note, we need to try the honey.
Yeah.
You just hear me
Oh wow! Damn. Yeah. That is honey. All right.
Oh yeah. But
wow,
not
like that legit, real honey. Real honey. And so honey cask. I mean, I guess, and I feel like because I think Garrison Brothers from Texas do something similar. So it's not like a honey flavoring for anybody who's like, oh, honey. It's not like a flavoring like an apple Jack Daniels or something like that. it's, I guess, can you explain like
Absolutely.
the cask itself?
So, and we put it on there. It's honey cask.
Yeah.
So we actually have a partnership with a local.
still taste it.
Yeah, it's. Oh, you're gonna be
Yeah.
you're gonna be chewing on that for a while.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, ooh, he's gonna love this. You can already smell off the top. But we actually have a partnership with a. Oh gosh, I don't even know what it's called, but honeybee, like hive caretakers.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what's the word for beekeepers?
Beekeeper, yeah.
There's anyway, it's fine. I apologize. But basically we have a relationship with them where they have their honey in barrels, and you can actually buy jars of the honey too at the distillery. And we sell those, but we actually finish it in their cask. So if you think about it, it's like coated, the cask is coated in honey. Basically, you don't want to leave it in for too long. I've had this conversation with Andy, and he's like, I think it's about 6 months. We don't like to do more than that because then that honey starts to overpower.
Yeah.
But you think about how the honey interacts with the barrel, and now you have aged bourbon blending with not only a barrel, but a honey, layering in the barrel. It starts to like crystallize and things of that nature because of the sugar. So it's just like a really complex like interaction, the way that it's been described to me, and because I loved it so much, I asked 1.5 million questions. But that's where like you said, it's just in my take on it, it's just a beautiful just accentuation of the bourbon, hints of the honey, but not overtly sweet, definitely nothing of like an additive or artificial level. Just a real a nice roundness, and so you're taking and this is high proof too, so it's coming off the cask, and it's about I think 113 proof almost.
112.9. That's what I was checking it because I read that before we tasted it, and I was just looking at it again. I was like, wow, I would not have. It's super crushable.
It's the same with the reserve. Like I forget sometimes that I'm drinking almost 108 proof, because of the finish on it. And I feel the same I think that's why the honey cask resonates with so many, but even the sherry cask, that has a really that's a really smooth finish. And it just accentuates what we're doing. It plays so well with the bourbon, with the rye in that bourbon. But yeah, it packs a punch, it does, but not enough to be like, oh, I need to only have one.
Oh man, yeah, this is like a perfect dessert. Damn, wow.
He's like, why did you tease me with just a bottle?
And
or just a taste?
It's all as far as the classic reserve bourbon, this is that same mash bill, the same high rye, everything.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So say you're looking at your same base here. The only difference is after it's been aged and blended, we're then finishing it in the honey cask. Funny, I think when I had Charlie out here a few months ago, or Andy out here a few months ago, he was telling me about kind of how they started, even under the Bell Mead label, how they started doing the honey cask finish. And basically there was, again, blanking on their actual name. Is it aviary? Is that or maybe that's with birds. I don't know. But doesn't matter. But basically their partner with honey, they had given them some old barrels, what have you, completely had forgotten about them. Mm-hmm. And he gets a call from the team there and was like, hey, did you want these barrels back? Because they had aged their honey in them. And he was like, oh my gosh, yeah. So they went down and they picked them up, and he just was like, let's just try it. We have these barrels. I bet that would be really good.
Oh, sorry. So I may have missed something because I was really into this. So so they're taking the barrels that were used to age the bourbon, and then they're like, hey,
they're sent
beekeeper people, you can put your honey in there. They put the honey in there, they age it for a little bit, and they're like, all right, you can bring them back. And so now this is the result.
It's a good little partnership.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think it's True Bee Honey, if I'm not mistaken, is our partner now. We did go through a change. But I believe it is True Bee as our partners now. But producing, I think, one of my absolute favorites of all the marks that they have as far as cask finishes. The honey might be my number one, even under Bell Mead. There is a very, very fun picture of me at the distillery. Essentially, with our whole group that was there, we got to open a bit of the library collection, which was awesome. And all the bottles, I was at the end of it, so all the bottles made their way in front of me. And so at the end of it, I think I had like 9 bottles lined up. And so one of them was the Bell Mead. And this was before we had the honey cask or the 15 rye or anything of that nature. They were all still under the Bell Mead umbrella. And so I tried each of them next to each other, but the honey stood out. So when I saw this come out, I knew they were working on it. I didn't know. It was kind of like a surprise, like, hey, this will be ready. I think it was Labor Day weekend of 2022. And I was like, I was looking at flights. How do I get to Nashville?
Yeah,
like, how do I get a bottle?
Yeah,
I was so excited. So the good news is we will be having more of this.
Okay.
And that was kind of my point in wanting to bring it, is not to just tease
right.
and dangle it and like, ooh, look what we have, but to, be on alert that when these start to come out, they are going to be limited releases like they were with Bell Mead. They're going to be kind of like High West, I think, timed out. So like a quarterly type thing on the calendar. I don't have those dates to put in your calendar just yet, but this is just showing that we are still continuing that work. Just because we've changed the wrapper a little bit and changing the branding, we're still very much committed to creating really beautiful everyday spirits, but then also some of these fun, unique finishes. And I honestly just think there's even more room to grow. Like who knows what else, we'll be seeing under the Nelson Brothers umbrella, but I'm very, very excited. Which brings me to one that I did not expect to get my hands on, because it was super, super limited release, even less than the honey cask, was the first time we have bottled a rye under the Nelson's name. This is a 15-year rye. It's a select between 8 barrels. So, like I said, very, very limited production.
Wow.
Thank you, Andy and Charlie. Merry Christmas to me. This was, again, very super limited. The first one I've seen with even a little gold medallion on it. But I think it is setting us up beautifully to announce that we will be releasing our very first rye. So a straight rye blend. I don't have an ETA on that just yet, or all the details, but I do know it's coming. I saw a label. So exciting news for us, that we have, we're just going to expand the portfolio a little bit more. But this is really special. And I know you're a rye guy, so I think this is just going to really, really warm up the heart.
And I feel like you don't see those like high age statements for rye very often too.
You really don't. I think we talked about this with High West, and you've maybe noted on some of your other podcasts, but rye typically, speaking of maturity, it's much younger.
Yeah.
So that you tend to go, I would say that like 2 to 7, 4 to 11, kind of depends on what you're going for, right? So to see, 15-year rye is pretty unique, but really, really exciting.
I had 18-year-old rye once a couple years ago. I don't know if I should say which one it was, but it tasted like barbecue, like brisket. It was the Lock, Stock, and Barrel, and they do like a 20-some year, and it was good.
Yeah.
I liked it. And I need to try it again at some point, but I remember thinking, I'm like, this is like barbecue, just like meat, like savory meat, but in a good way. Like, I know that sounds weird, but it was good.
No, I already told you the main food groups. We had coffee, whiskey, and meat, so you're good.
That's rye, all right. Man, yeah, that's rich. I feel like I'm getting like all the spices. There was one, I did an episode recently where we did the Hardin's Creek, the 15, 16-year-old one. And I said that the flavors felt like a book where it was just like pages like whooshing by with like a different note on each page. And that's how this one feels.
Yeah, I agree. I thought as soon as I tasted this, not to sound dramatic, but I kind of was like, oh, I kind of want to cry. Like it's really, really beautiful. And I feel like I use that word a lot, but it really is. It's super complex. You can taste I love that expression of like you just keep turning a page,
Yeah.
but it really is. It's a spirit that keeps giving. It keeps expressing itself in different ways. Unique little layers. I mean, I can't help but think when I taste it of like, what do we have? Some that are going to be 20? Do we?
Right.
Like what is next, or how would this taste? And I can't help but think like maybe that's hopefully how Andy and Charlie think too. So I'm just saying, guys.
That's a damn good rye. Like, yeah, very complex and just very balanced. Like a lot of the spice, and I mean, a lot of that's probably because we just drank the honey one too. So there's automatically gonna be a lot of contrast, but there's still that sweetness. I can still tell that it's the same. That
Family.
It's like the Nelson Bros too. It's like all of them, despite different mash bills and finishes, and even being a rye here, it's like I feel like I can still tell it's all from the same family.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so funny
Wow.
you say that, because I think that's part of it too, is people don't, when you just drink like a one-off or you just have the one, you don't necessarily look at someone's like portfolio as a whole,
Yeah.
like we're doing, and getting to taste that full lineup or have them side by side, and you really do lock into, okay, this is who they are as blenders. Like, in this case, we're not distilling, but we work very hand in hand to create the mash bill that we want to see. And then it's bringing it in-house and we're blending, and then we're aging in-house. So it really starts to show that continuity across,
Yeah.
each SKU is we want to do some unique things, but at the end of the day, it's still got to be us. It's still got to be true in our flavor profile, and that we want people to be like, oh, that's the Nelson Brothers.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Greenbrier, that's going to be who it is.
Yeah.
But as we, as we put our own mark, on new products that are coming out and what we're working on, I think that's the exciting thing, is to see, just to see the growth and who we are and that identity.
And do you know, I mean, is this, because I know it's like a blend of, it says 8 different barrels.
Mm-hmm.
Is it one mash bill, or is it like a blend of different mash bills at all? Like, is it?
I don't have that detail. That's a really great question. I do know I'm almost positive it's from our friends at MGP. Because I believe it's Indiana produced rye. I believe it says it on the bottle too. Don't mark my words on that. But I'm not sure if it's all the same mash bill, but knowing my work, like knowing how we work with MGP, not just with Nelson's, but also at High West, they typically do a 95% rye and a 5% malted rye, is a lot of their standard.
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if if it was consistent. But that's actually a really great question. Now you've given me, I'm like, okay, cool. Let me call them up and say, hey.
Yeah, because I imagine it's probably not like the 51% barely legal, but
No.
like the 95.5, maybe somewhere in the middle. But man, yeah.
You know what? I have to actually check. This could very well be, it could very well be 100% rye. I'm not entirely sure on the mash bill. Some secrets are just, left better as that, right? We didn't, it's funny because I was even surprised. I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on what's going on at Nelson's, having direct line to the brothers and others who work at the distillery. But this kind of just came out of nowhere. I remember being like, what? Oh, whoa, this is really cool. And I was reading up on it, and, it's only so much information that they are wanting to share, being the first time we've done this. So I can understand wanting to keep it like close to the pocket, but I didn't even think I was going to get a bottle. So that was even more like exciting and special. When it came in the mail, I was like, oh my gosh. So it's really cool, but I think it's, in some ways too, though, they're setting this, like I said, they're setting the stage for what's coming next.
Yeah.
So to know that I don't have all the details on the rye that is coming out, definitely going to be younger.
Yeah.
But I do know it's straight rye, so you can expect it's going to be high rye, of course. But I don't know, it'll be fun to see how that mash bill breaks down. I will say the cool thing about Andy and Charlie's like they don't tend to hide too much or keep anything, like a closely guarded secret.
Right.
I think that they really like to channel their triple great grandfather Charles Nelson, and that it is meant to be shared by everybody. Of course, there's some things proprietary, and you want to keep those things tightly guarded. But for the most part, he's pretty transparent about what we're doing at the distillery. And I think that's what people love even more, is they want to know what's going on, where are you sourcing, how are you blending, what are you drinking?
Yeah.
So it'll be cool. I'm really excited. That the nerd in me is very excited, but also a little bit of a brand fangirl, to see what's next and to experience it in real time with everybody else. I don't typically get to try anything before others. So
Right.
just know we're out here kind of experiencing it in real time and learning more about it, and having these conversations of like, oh, I wonder if that's for me. It's like, oh, I should go see what I can find out, and see what they can share. So that's how I've learned so much more, is just sitting in, hearing these distillers and the production team talk, and if I feel like I'm geeky, they make me look like elementary.
Yeah.
So to hear them talking about the science behind it and the specifics and what they're looking at and how they're noodling over different things, it's a really cool process. And just, again, it shows you how much craftsmanship and artistry really goes into this.
Yeah.
I know I talk about it in terms of like art and like passion, but that's how these start. These are
definitely.
people. These are hardworking individuals behind each of these bottles, and that's really fun to share and to remind people.
Yeah. Well, a lot of time, a lot of history.
Yeah.
It feels, it's one of those things we take for granted, right? It's like anytime a barrel or a bottle gets made, it's like a movie. If I tie it into the movie thing, it's like people will say, experienced filmmakers, like anytime you get a movie made, it's a miracle. And I feel that like when I hear about, there was one ambassador I talked to a while ago about they were aging like a wheat bourbon for many years. I think they were getting to that, like they were over 20, and then they opened it when the time came and all of it evaporated, and they were like, like stuff like that, or just
because you don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
They just like, all right, here we go. This has been in here for like 25 years, and then nothing.
It's so funny. It's just even going back to how they got the distillery off the ground, like. They were told a lot of no's. You
Right.
think about it, two young guys that have no true like they have a historical connection, but they don't have any modern day connections and ties to the industry. Didn't have much capital. The family, everybody was kind of pitching in and helping as much because they believed in it so much. Hearing, knowing them firsthand and hearing their story and what it was like for them, they were couch surfing, in cities where they had friends like, hey, and they would literally take bottles, whether it's the Belle Meade or in this case, like the Nelsons, and literally just walk in and be like, hey, can I tell you my story? Can I taste this? That's still like that's a Charlie Nelson move right there, is to just whip out a bottle out of his back pocket and be like, hey guys, what's up? But it is that grassroots. It was that organic. Constellation, I have to say, was involved pretty early on. We have a venture team that we invest in some of these, smaller brands. We fell in love with them and believed in what they're doing, and okay, let's give you some money. Let's see what you can do with it and how we can build this brand. And then in more recent history, we saw great growth with it, and truly got the capacity and the tools they needed to bring this to life and fully distill for ourselves. And so now it's a majority acquisition in that state, but it's a partnership. Andy and Charlie I again go back to Constellation, not big business coming in and gobbling up this small brand and taking away its authenticity. It's actually, I would say, working hand in hand, listening to these guys. This is their legacy. This is their baby, and they have a clear direction on who they are and what they want. So it's really exciting to just now we get to full support and keep lifting it, telling the story. That's really what it comes back to, is sharing the story over a few drams, walking through history, and then experiencing some of the new goodies. But it's just, I can't say enough good things. I know I sound like an Uber fangirl.
Yeah.
It's not just because they pay me to. I really, really love this brand. And I think anyone I meet that knows Nelson's, knows Belle Meade, it really resonates. It's not just like, oh yeah, like, oh, I know them. And they're like, oh, I love Belle Meade.
Yeah.
Like, I've been looking for it. Where is it? And so, it opens up a really cool conversation. And then on top of it, you start to talk about and introduce the OG Tennessee whiskey. Most people can only name one or two, if that. So it's nice to kind of shake that up a little bit and challenge the status quo in that regard, and be like, you know what? There's some other Tennessee whiskeys out there, and we're here to play and have some fun. But it is a good community. I can't say that we get too competitive. It's a lot of learning. Actually, Dave Pickerel, if I'm not mistaken, it's when he was working on Whistle Pig. Andy went to him and was kind of like, hey, here's our idea. Like, this is what we've got. Can you help us? And he's like, well, I'm actually working on my own little project. But he did. He actually gave Andy a lot of insight and how to think about distilling and blending and the industry as a whole. So when I say it's a tightly knit community, and it's really, really cool that, there's people out there, old guard wanting to help the new guard, wanting to help keep this, especially American craft spirits, keep this, going, this momentum, and see all the cool things that are happening, and not just in Kentucky.
Yeah,
so
no,
there's
definitely
a lot happening outside of that few mile radius. So it's an exciting time, I think, in whiskey production.
And are they, and I mean, we'll wrap it up soon, but are there single barrel releases of Nelson Bros too, or like store picks to look forward to and all that?
Not at this time, but possibly that I'm sure that's on the horizon in the next few years. I don't know how quickly, I don't know all their secrets and what all they have going on and are currently aging, but we are going through the expansion. So I think, the next step is to reopen bigger and better. We have very much have that look forward to. We have these going at a national capacity and no inventory, we're in a really good place with that. And doing some of the cask finishes. So I can only think that once everything's stabilized, that growth's just going to continue. I personally would love to see a barrel select or a barrel release or a program of some sort roll out. I mean, it'd be really, really cool. We talk about being blenders. It'd be really cool to get to kind of blend your own at the distillery, at this new beautiful facility that is being renovated and created. So who knows?
Right on.
It's kind of like with High West. I'm always like, never say never, because everyone's just so talented, so excited, and driven by their passion and their art and their craft, that it's, if they've got something good, they're gonna roll with it.
Dang. Well, thanks a lot for sharing this, man. I'm again pleasantly surprised, and it's always fun to do this. But I don't know the order or when I'm going to release these episodes, but we did some tequilas, and now we're here, and I'm like, shit, I'm about to spend like so much money once I pack all this stuff.
I mean, I'm not gonna be mad about it.
Yeah.
But no, that's it's good stuff. I always maintain. I have a really, really cool portfolio that I get to represent, and it's diverse enough that I don't feel things are competing too much. Two whiskey brands, but High West is so unique and maybe a little bit further on the down the path than Nelson's is right now. So it's cool to see where we can be. With Nelson's. And then on the tequila side, it's really exciting just to get to educate.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's just really exciting to get to educate more on agave in general. More than people are consuming it than they ever have before, and starting to recognize what they like, what they don't like. So it's really exciting for me to be like, well, here's this really cool brand that's gone through, a reinvention, have a really amazing craft brandy out of Louisville, Kentucky. So that's in of itself saying, they're right there in Butchertown on the water next to Bourbon distilleries. So that's really cool. Barbados rum, or Barbadian rum, so to throw in there too. So it's really, I have to say that's the best part of my job is the portfolio is amazing. The hardest part is there's only one of me trying to talk about all these amazing spirits and get them in front of people who are going to appreciate them and enjoy them, and help be stewards of the brand, but stewards also of the category and of American craft spirits, and not just American craft spirits in general. So thanks for having me on multiple times. I hope I haven't bored anybody.
No, thanks again, and thanks for sharing these two. I know I can tell you're probably really trying to save that one. But yeah, no, these are great. If anyone's out there listening to this that's in Tennessee, you got to hit this place up and see what you can find. And anyone else, definitely don't sleep on this. Like, I know I see it I would see it on the shelves sometimes, and I'm glad we were doing this. I was like, all right, I'm gonna wait till we do our recording before I like pull triggers. And I definitely see them enough, so I know they're out there. And
they are, and we've been seeing a lot of success here locally of people just really resonating with the brand, resonating with the juice itself, and then of course that story, seeing the history, on the Greenbrier, seeing the label. Even when Charlie and Andy come back, because they went to LMU, so they have huge local ties to Southern California, and they enjoy getting over here. And they're still in Nashville, so when they get to pop out. So it's really, really cool for me to get to see people connect with it. Like we were talking about, just build that so organically, so like authentic, as it should be, that we're starting to get some really, really great, feedback and I would say momentum. People are starting to, stuff like this. Oh, I saw it on there. Or I went to this bar and I had it there. Where can I go buy it? So it's, and it's all connected, which is really, really fun. But yeah, the limited releases, sorry, it was just a little tease, but I think it's, be on alert. Follow Nelson's Greenbrier on social media, Casa Noble Tequila on Instagram. But I would say Nelson's is super active. So constantly posting updates, sharing things that they're tagged in. Really, they are one of the most excited groups and welcoming groups of people I've ever worked with, and just want to see Nelson's thrive and want to share it with as many people as we can. Definitely if you're in Nashville or in that vicinity, hightail it over to the distillery, or wait until the expansion. Should be a brand new Nelson's Greenbrier released in like May, maybe early June. But we're super stoked about that. It's kind of messy right now in some places, but but you can still go and tour, and the general store is open. Public tours are still open. We also have a bar there that you can pop in, so you can still enjoy all of that. Just pardon the dust as we are building a bigger and better Nelson's Greenbrier.
Right on. Well, Becky, again, thanks so much for coming down and spending the day here, sharing Nelson Bros with myself and the listeners. Appreciate it.
Yeah. My pleasure. All right. Cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Drinks and a Movie podcast. You can now find us on Instagram at Drinks and a Movie Pod, where we'll be posting photos from all the various films that we discuss. You can also email us at drinksandamoviepod@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and thank you for listening.